Spindle Geometry. This video is going to be about sacred geometry, non-physical geometry, essence geometry, whatever you want to call it, in the context of biological processes. This video will just touch the tip of the iceberg. There are many more videos to come. So, why do I say spindle? It's very precise language. First of all, the word refers to tools used in manually processing raw wool into thread. There are two parts to it, the distaff or stave and the spindle. The spindle is basically just a stick that the thread is wound around. But the distaff is the tool we're interested in, because when the word spindle is used in a geometrical sense, you're actually referring to the distaff shape. It's basically a cage to hold your bundle of wool, which allows you to gradually pull it out. A lot of times it will have this distinctive shape, like a flower bud, bulging out the sides, then coming back into a point. Presumably it's this shape because it's easier to make this tool in this manner. But who knows? All I know is that the concept of spindle geometry comes from this tool called a distave. Understand that I am not the one to start using this term. In contemporary science, it is not a spiritual term, it is a biological term, meaning it is a term used in science to describe the shapes of a variety of biological structures. First off, the most obvious example of this are spindle fibers. Spindle fibers are the microtubules of a cell which rearrange during mitosis into a spindle shape. I believe that this shape is very important to understanding these biological processes at the non-physical level. Right now, science is stumbling with getting deeper understanding with these things because students are ideologically trained into using certain language and therefore thinking a certain way. The process of mitosis is basically compartmentalized. What they do is describe these stages in any way they can, which is good, kudos to them, but they give little labels to everything in an effort to describe them. So for example, they call the microtubules spindle fibers because they kind of look like a distave. And the cell divides along a line during metaphase, so they call the line the metaphase line or metaphase plate. And because they label these shapes, they say, well, these shapes are labels, constructs. It's a weird mental process, and it prevents one from arriving at a deeper understanding. I will definitely be focused a lot on mitosis and how it pertains to the non-physical characteristic we call life. But for right now, I also want to bring to your attention another very interesting biological process involving taste buds. Right off the bat, you know this is super interesting because, again, they name a structure after something else because it has a similar shape, namely flower buds, right? It's just so funny to me how geometry is used in the naming of a structure, and yet no thought is given to its process. No thought is given to how maybe the geometry has to do with the mechanisms or the processes involved. They call it a taste bud because it looks like a flower bud, but no thought is given to how a taste bud and a flower bud are similar. Anyway, if you read about the taste bud, you will eventually see it being described as being spindle-shaped. I've taken a handful of basic neuroscience courses, but in no way am I an expert in biological chemistry. But I can tell you that a lot of the language used to describe these biological mechanisms show the absolute shallow level of knowledge we have. So, for example, the terms bind and signal. When reading about taste receptors, you will come across these terms very often, such as the so-and-so sweet molecule binds to the receptor and sends a signal to the brain. a sweet signal. My first question is, why and how does it bind? No one knows the answer to this question. Just like no one knows how gravity works. No one knows why our feet bind to the ground. Is it little angel hands coming out of the taste bud and grabbing the sweet molecule? Probably not. Secondly, the term signal is an empty, meaningless term that we use to pretend we know what's going on. Just like the term information. You hear these terms in the context of neuroscience all the time. He touched the hot flame and a signal went up his arm. Pain information is transferred up his arm. What does that mean? It says nothing about consciousness, and then they say consciousness is an illusion because it's just signals and information, and yet there's no definition for these concepts. Now here's my opinion. Here's my jab at arriving at a solution. I think that the binding action itself is a non-physical event called coherence, which is the same mechanism of consciousness within the nervous system. I also think that gravity is coherence, just like magnetism is coherence. The word coherence has many synonyms, but I use that term because of its connotations regarding magnetism. Magnetism is a great example of coherence because it helps one comprehend what is going on. I'm not saying that consciousness and sweetness and gravity are magnetism. I'm saying that all of these things, including magnetism, are different types of coherence. You may not know this, but all materials are magnetic to varying degrees. In fact, there are long lists of materials ordered by their magnetic abilities. Of course, the factor which determines whether a material is highly magnetic or not is its physical structure, which leaves us at this revelation having to do with the phenomenon of taste. If you go to a restaurant or coffee shop or whatever, you will come across little multicolored packets of artificial sweetener. You may not know this, but there are actually many kinds of sugar substitutes beyond the blue, pink, and yellow packets. Many substances on Earth taste sweet, some more than others. And just how materials are listed in order of magnetism, there are lists of materials ordered by level of sweetness. Now, isn't that interesting? You have the spindle geometry of magnetism, namely iron filings, and you have the spindle geometry of sweetness. Both involve mechanisms of physical movement due to mysterious and unknown origin. Isn't that interesting? This is a topic that I am passionate about and I am really motivated to learn more. And I am making these videos to spark discussion with people so that maybe we can all learn more about it together. A great way to get on the same page as me to really understand my point of view is to read my book, Consciousness is Coherence, an Ontological Basis, which you can order off of Amazon for about $3 or read for free off of my website, exoteric.org.